Welcome all to episode 8 of Sharing Life Lessons. I am your host Hamida, and I want to bring you stories because stories inspire, stories teach, and stories heal. As I mentioned in the last episode, I was not going to be able to publish last week's episode because we were going away on a family vacation because my kids had spring break, and I really missed that. I'm so excited to be back, and I'm so excited to be publishing another episode this week. But before I introduce our guest for today, obviously I need to be talking, and I want to be talking about the COVID-19 situation that we are in. We are all hearing so much about it. And so I will not tell you, or I will not discuss anything that we already know. What I want to do is talk about or read out different perspectives, not the perspective that social media is giving us, not the perspective that the government is giving us, not the perspective that the National Institute of Health is giving us, but perspectives of individuals that differ from this um, mayhem of information that we are getting. And I want to start this by telling you something that happened between my son Avi and myself right before the spring break started and right before we went away on vacation. Avi sat me down, and when we have something important to tell each other, we sit each other down. And so Avi sat me down and he said that he was very satisfied with the way, and he's a junior in high school. So he said he was very satisfied with the way his junior year was going. But he also felt that he had one last chance to bring up all of his grades because it is the junior year's grades that really count for college admissions. And so he said for the second half of his junior year, he wants to be able to bring it up a notch. And for that, he needs to do some planning. And for that, he needs to do some thinking. And he said, Mommy, you may feel like I'm not doing a lot of work this week, but know that I am in my head and on my computer planning the rest of my junior year. In a sense, he said, Mommy, I need to reset. That was very heartwarming. I was glad that he was thinking about this. He was planning, he had this under control. But just a couple of days ago, I thought about this episode and I said, reset. I need a reset. Maybe that's exactly what we all need. And that's exactly what COVID-19 is offering to all of us, a reset of our lives. Maybe our lives is going too fast. Maybe it's going um, without a plan. Maybe there is too much chaos in it. And maybe COVID-19 is that medium through which the universe is asking all of us to pause, to step back, and to reset. Here is a readout of a writing that my dear friend Laura Hernandez sent to me. Unfortunately, I can't give credit for it to anyone because it is written by an anonymous person. But this is the way it goes. And the people stayed home and read books and listened and rested and exercised and made art and played games and learned new ways of being and was still and listened more deeply. Some meditated, some prayed, some danced, some met their shadows. And the people began to think differently. And the people healed. And in the absence of people living in ignorant, dangerous, mindless, and heartless ways, the earth began to heal. And when the danger passed and the people joined together again, they grieved their losses and made new choices and dreamed new images and created new ways to live and heal the earth fully as they had been healed. We can only hope that what the author has envisioned in this writing actually turns out to be true. And when COVID 19 is abolished from the face of this earth really, really soon, it would have left behind a lot of healing. Our guest for today is actually going to be talking to us about something related. She's going to be talking to us about grief and about her healing mechanisms. She lives in far northern California, writes daily, and travels when she can. Her newest book of poems, One Mother's Revolution, is an attempt to make sense of the current state of the world through poetry. Everyone, welcome Anne Fricke. And I am so happy to have you on the show. Before you tell us your story, can you please tell us something more about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. I am a mother of three daughters. I'm a wife, a poet, an author, a storyteller, a podcaster. I perform poetry regularly and I host a Storytellers Open Mic. And I also created and host the podcast Walking with Freya, a journey through special needs parenting. And from that, I have also just recently published a book. It's a writing journal for parents and caregivers on the journey of raising children with special needs. And that is called There's Joy to Be Found Here. And that is full of my own experiences and mostly writing prompts to help other parents write about their experiences. I'm really excited to be on this podcast.
So you are everything I am not. You have the entire creative side of writing and authoring. I think in everything you've said, the only thing you and I have in common is podcasting, because I come from the very math and financial background. I've been working in banks for over 20 years. So I think this is going to be a very interesting dialogue. That being said, Anne, please tell us your story.
As far as where what's gotten me to really to the clarity that I have now in my life and the inspiration for the work that I do, there were two things that really kind of rocked my world, and brought me the clarity that I have. And this was about 8 years ago. Well, first my brother got a diagnosis of cancer, and then a year later my mother did, and they're both alive and well today. So that turned out well. But then my father, who was 57 at the time and was, the man that took me out in the woods and took me fishing and coached my softball team and took me hiking and, was very active. And he had a stroke. I was 14 weeks pregnant with my second child, and he had a very debilitating stroke, and he has never been the same person, um, as far as his abilities to physically get around, to speak, to it's just it really was a life changer. And that happened. And then the child that I was pregnant with when that happened, when she was born with a genetic disorder called Prader-Willi syndrome, and she didn't get diagnosed till she was 3.5 months. But so there was a lot of grief in that year and a lot of questioning. My dad had a stroke, but we didn't know how severe it was gonna be for him. And then, I gave birth to this baby who was struggling in so many ways, and we didn't understand why. And so there was just a lot of struggles and a lot of grief for a while. And um, you know, it it was it took me 5 years to be able to talk about my dad without crying. Or people would ask me how he was doing, and I would just brush him off, say, I don't know. Or because I couldn't face it, I couldn't talk about it, I couldn't deal with the grief. And it wasn't until 5 years after it happened that I got up on stage and I performed a 5-minute poem that I had written about him. And that was the first time that I was ever able to really talk about him and not cry and not brush it off. And so it was really powerful to be able to share my dad in that way with all of these people. And when I was done, so many people came up to me afterwards to express sentiments of, that was beautiful, and I'm sorry this happened. But there were other people that had their own stories that were, that they could commiserate with, and that I was able to form this little connection with them through these stories. And it was a really powerful experience for me in that way. And the same with having a child with special needs. The first poem that I wrote about my daughter, she was probably about 3 years old, and I performed this poem on stage, and it so happened that her speech therapist was there. And when I came down off the stage, her therapist came up to me and hugged me, and she was crying, and oh, that was so beautiful. And the next day, I walked into speech because Freya had her session that day, and this woman told me how that poem had changed the way that she sees her job, that it brought more humanity to it, and that she realized that there was more to her job than just sitting at the table and going through this paperwork, the parents, and all this bureaucratic stuff, and she was able to glimpse aside, she was able to glimpse it from being on the other side of the table, and that as the parent, and that really opened her eyes a bit. And so that was just another really powerful example of sharing our stories, and whether we write a poem and perform it on stage, or whether we just share it with a friend, or a stranger we meet sitting at a bus stop. These our stories are how we make connections.
Thank you, Anne, for so openly sharing with us your two life events that actually caused you grief in your life. And your grief was not even short lived. You actually were grieving for a good 5 years. Now, some people think or relate grief to just a death or a loss of a friend or a family, but that's not what Mayo Clinic says. If you look it up and you say, what is grief in Mayo Clinic? It says grief is a strong, sometimes overwhelming emotion for people, regardless of whether their sadness stems from the loss that includes the death of a loved one, the ending of an important relationship, job loss, loss through theft, or the loss of independence through disability. And this is not an exhaustive list. Any myriad of things could happen in your life which could cause you grief, and it is okay. It's nothing is too small or too big to cause you grief. Now, why I'm telling you this is because we are all also in this situation where we see COVID-19 impacting so many people in so many ways, including impacting us with social distancing. And some may be able to handle that better than the others. It seems like the youth are not able to handle it very well, and they feel like we're writing a death sentence for them by asking them to socially distance themselves. Um, that could cause grief to them. And everyone also has this healing mechanism from grief, which really Anne found in writing and performing poetry. So, Anne, tell us what really changed when you wrote and you recited and performed poetry.
So what changed was that, I wrote this poem, and there's a lot of memories in this poem, but I didn't get up on stage and read it from the paper. I performed it, so that meant that I memorized it. But in memorizing it, I had to go over this poem, and I had to keep reading through these memories, and I really had to face all of these beautiful but painful memories. And so I couldn't just brush things off or ignore them. I really wanted to do this poem well. And so it was really healing to sit with this, and to remember all of these things, and to come to this conclusion that I came to in the poem, about just what a beautiful, how painful it is what's happened, but I have these beautiful memories, and this beautiful experience of being raised by such a fabulous father. So just really having to sit with it all, and face it. That's really what got me able, helped me move through it, and be able to talk about it.
That is powerful, and the reason why I resonate with it so much is because my dad passed away in 2014. Uh, may his soul rest in peace. And he
Mm.
was my hero. He did many things that your dad did with you. He took me with him everywhere. We did yoga together. He taught me how to bicycle. He taught me how to even ride the motorcycle. And he taught me how to horse ride. He's the one who uh, made me adventurous and actually taught me how to take risks in life. Is the one who, if I said, "Oh, I'm going for a hike," and he would say, "Yeah, but where's the risk in it? Go on a motorcycle ride."
Nice.
So I fully understand what you may have gone through. But can I would really like for you to share a little bit of the poem with us, if you can.
Yes, yeah. So it's a long poem, but if I um to give you a taste, so I can give you like the first stanza and then the last stanza, how it all
That'll be
comes
great.
together.
That'll be beautiful.
Okay. So it starts off, he is the shining knight of my youth, donning dark blue polyester baseball shorts, too short for any sensible man in his 30s. My provider, my protector, in a pseudo Fu Manchu style mustache dribbling down his chin like moss on an oak tree. And then it just goes through all of these memories, and some get a little more serious. And
Can you
I
share
got,
one memory with us?
yeah, one specific memory, or another one from the poem.
Another one from the poem.
So yeah, he is a man rumbling down the road in a rusted out, beat up pickup truck, dragging a bass boat and singing Jim Croce songs, laughingly out of tune. And every time I hear Jim Croce, I think of my dad, and I think about these fishing trips that we would go on, and just the two of us in his beat up truck, and he's got his bass boat dragging behind the truck, and we always had Jim Croce playing, and he would sing, and he wasn't the best singer, but we just always had so much fun singing together, driving past cornfields in Indiana. So yeah.
That's beautiful. And then you were gonna take us to the last stanza.
Yeah. He is the man who reminds me of crisp autumn mornings, warming cold feet by the campfire, hash and eggs for dinner, sitting stoically in a boat on a calm, quiet, shimmering lake, backpacking in thunderstorms and snow. The man who blessed me with the knowledge of safety, security, pride, and unconditional love. And if my daughters remember me as fondly as I remember him, then my life will have been as meaningful as his.
That is really heartwarming. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Yeah. It still gets me a little choked up.
I'm sure. I'm sure. It gave me the chills too, though. And then you were talking about how you also performed a poem for your daughter. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I've performed a few poems, but this first one was just really kind of trying to express uh, what it's like in the beginning when you get a diagnosis, and how you have this baby, and then you get a diagnosis, and their future is shattered, in
Yeah.
a way.
Yeah.
And I titled it, I had seen on Facebook or some social media this little meme about this Japanese art form called kintsugi. And it's where uh, you have pieces of this broken pottery, and you glue the pieces back together with gold or with silver. And the idea is that the history of the object is still there. The story is still there, and it's even more beautiful because it was previously broken. And so that I kind of used that metaphor in a way to come to terms with having this child. We have all these expectations, and oh, my kid's going to do this or that, and then you get this diagnosis, and then doctors are saying, well, this isn't going to happen, or they're not going to do this, or this is how their life's going to go. And so just mostly just trying to understand that myself, and express that experience.
I see. And you, so just staying with that a bit, because it seems to me that you're using poem as your form of expression to express or to help you in your grieving process. Am I interpreting this correctly?
Yes, absolutely. Very much writing is my therapy. It is my meditation. It is my counselor. So and poetry is one form of writing that I use, but it is the most special to me. I write short stories. I've written a novel. I write in a variety of genres, but when I really need to tackle these really intense emotions, poetry is how I tend to do that.
And then when you do that, what does that do to you internally? Does it make you come to terms with what you're going through?
In a way, yeah. Well, it clears it out.
Hmm.
Like like these experiences are so like the thing with my dad, I just kept pushing things down, pushing them aside, and these feelings and these memories, they were all just getting kind of like shoved in a corner, and I wasn't really looking at them. So writing this poem was a way to like bring them all out and dust them off and and display them for myself again. And then so there's the writing part and then the performing part, which is in a way, sharing our stories. The performing is a whole other aspect to it. And which I've just like it's just been the last 4 years that I've been performing poetry. And that adds a whole other element of sharing what you've written. Excuse me, sharing what you've written. And so yeah, there's a lot to it, but the writing part is really finding the clarity, really, because there's things that I write that I don't really understand why they upset me until I write them, until I see this phrase on the page that I've written. And so many times when I'm writing, and I get into the flow, and then I'll write something and I'll go, oh, wow, okay, it like makes sense to me.
That almost sounds like journaling. Some of my friends have told me that when they journal, they just keep writing, and when they read back what they've written, it seems like they have offloaded their innermost feelings, and that act itself just makes them feel better. But going back to you, and just tell us more. I had to throw that in.
I've always been the kind of person that if I'm having some kind of issue or difficulty or pain, sharing that with somebody else m- just makes it easier to bear or makes it easier to think about. There's something that I have that, by getting things out of my head feels like, okay, now I can deal with this. It's not just this thing that's like eating away at me. It's tangible almost. It's something that I can deal with because I can see it written on a paper or because I've told somebody else about it. And so it's out there now. It's not just in my head. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but
No, it absolutely does, because that's why right in the beginning I said, I can't wait to hear what you're going to say, because that's exactly my perspective. My tagline for the podcast is stories inspire, stories teach, and stories heal. And
yeah.
you're really talking about the healing part of it.
Hmm.
But I came into this with the perspective that if you have a story to tell and you're sharing it with others, you're really sharing your innermost knowledge. Where if they are probably going through the same thing, they won't feel alone. They won't feel like they're um, they're going through this alone. But what you bring to this is the opposite. You're saying, when I share, I feel less burdened. I get clarity. So it works both ways, which is why stories are so beautiful.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I totally agree with your sentiment. And that is one of the things about doing the podcast for parents and caregivers of children with special needs, that's the biggest feedback that I've heard is from sharing my story, but then from others sharing their story, this feedback that, wow, I thought I was alone. I thought I was the only one having these experiences or on this journey. And then, I heard this story about another mom with a child with Down syndrome. And now I know, like, oh, there's somebody else doing the same thing. And so, yeah, that is the beauty of storytelling, is that it really just opens up all these connections to people that you may not realize that you have a connection with. So, it really, storytelling is like the oldest form of medicine in a way. I don't know, or the oldest form of community building. It's so crucial to who we are as a species.
Totally with you there. And so, Anne, can you tell us from all of so from both these episodes, what is the life lesson that you came out with and that you can share with the listeners?
Yeah. So I kind of, so the life lesson is, don't be afraid to share your story, but also to be genuine about it. That is an element that I really wanted to express as well, is that we have to be true with our stories and with what we're sharing. And I think especially in this age of social media, and people can, they take their pictures and then they can, gloss them over and put these filters, and they can choose what they're sharing with the world. And and so many times it's this false image, or this one little snippet of somebody's life, and then somebody else sees that and they think, oh wow, they've got it all together, they've got it all figured out, and what do I have? I'm a mess. I can't take a picture like that. My family doesn't do that. And so we're really, I think, doing a disservice in a way by having these platforms that we can gloss everything up. And so I really want to express the importance of being honest about your story and being genuine about your story, because when you're genuine, that's how you really find your people. And that is how people can really connect with you. And I think, if we all love realizing that we're all struggling in a way. That's that whole, that's how we connect, and we don't connect with people that we can't relate to. And so yeah, so in a long in a big roundabout way, being genuine, be genuine, and don't be afraid to share your story, whether it's up on stage performing a poem that you've been working on for months, or whether it's the person you're sitting next to on the bus. It's all important.
Or even sharing it on a podcast. So
Absolutely.
if there's anyone out there who is inspired and motivated by Anne and wants to share their stories, please get in touch with me. Contact me at sharinglifelessons101@gmail.com, and we could have you on as a guest so you could share your stories with our listeners. With that, and thank you so much for offering to be on the show. We had such a great dialogue. And folks, I have two things to say from everything that we've heard from Anne. Her life lesson is be genuine and share your story. And secondly, everyone has stresses. Everyone goes through grief, and everyone has hardships. You could have your own coping mechanism. So understand your own coping mechanisms. It could be exercising, it could be walking, it could be meeting friends for coffee and drinks, it could be journaling or writing, it could be even crying for emotional release. It could be any of this and much, much more. Anne knows that her coping mechanism, her therapy, her meditation, and her counselor is writing. What is yours? Lastly, if any of you would like to listen to Anne's podcast or read her books, details of all of that are in the show notes. Also, if listeners would like to support this podcast for sustainability of future episodes, you could go to anchor.fm, hit the support button there, and support it that way. Details of that are also in the show notes. I hope you've enjoyed listening to this episode as much as I have enjoyed recording it. I will bring you another episode of Sharing Life Lessons next Wednesday. Until then, be happy and be well.